Smell that, boys? Peak fiction is back on the menu. The first chapter of the JOJOLands just dropped recently, and I have to say what I've seen has made me very excited for the future of the series. As someone who started reading the manga part 5 onwards after the airing of Diamond is Unbreakable, the opening of this story definitely took me by surprise. The hopeful, forward-looking openings we've come to expect from part 7 and 8 have been flipped on their heads. We've gone from, "This story is the tale of me starting to walk," and "This story is about breaking a curse," to "This may sound like bullshit, but this is the story of one boy becoming rich in the subtropical islands." Araki, you have truly outdone yourself. No one could have predicted an opening like this. Also, there's the fact that it seems to be Araki narrating the intro, not Johnny or Yasuho like before. He's writing this thing going like, "Yup, this seems like bullshit." Because he knows a tale that sounds so deadpan and simple compared to everything else we've come to expect up to this point is outlandish. The motive of the Joestars have always been noble, erring on the side of justice. Whether it's becoming a true gentleman, saving the world, protecting loved ones, or just rooting out evil. Then this dude comes along not even pretending to have any honest intentions, just all like, I guess the name Jodio makes sense. The two of them seem to be kindred spirits in that department. I'll just say this before getting started with the story itself, that there's no use pretending that every Joestar came off as paragons of justice from start to end. In fact, I'd say nearly half the cast came off as assholish during their introductions. So we should be definitely giving Jodio here a shot, even though it appears that he's flipping everything we've come to know about the conduct of a Joestar on its head. So if you're one of those people that don't really jive with him right now, just know that like those who came before him, I believe he's going to grow as a person and won't be staying one-dimensional for long. That is, unless Araki is partaking in the same drugs Jodio is peddling. So first things first, I'd like to talk about the intro where we get a glimpse at the current setting of the JOJOLands, taking place in Oahu, Hawaii, one of the 6 major islands that compose the state. Though including smaller land masses, the total amount of islands in the Hawaiian chain would be about 137. These may be what the intro refers to as the subtropical islands if the story ends up taking place solely in Hawaii. Personally, I don't think that would be the case, as Jojolion made it clear that the Rokakaka might still exist in the southern islands and originated from the island of New Guinea. Many of the islands of Japan are considered subtropical, as well as much of New Guinea, so there's a chance that if this plot point is revisited, the journey could span across much of the globe. The probability that Jojolion would leave the Southern Islands question open-ended and JOJOLands would just so happen to take place within subtropical islands, which are in the south, and there being no relation between the two, is next to none. In fact, if you were to look at the 3 nations on a map, they form an unobstructed triangle, so traveling between them by boat as pictured in the teaser may be a possibility. With that out of the way, we can take a look at the story itself and see a bit of the plot and world building that is forming alongside it. This isn't meant to be a chronological retelling of the story, it's more of me going start to finish and bringing up things to discuss and points of interest, with the presumption that you are already aware of the events of the story for the sake of brevity. In fact, I think trying to be completely chronological would be an unwise decision discussion-wise, as many instances that happen later on are relevant to things that occur in the beginning of the story. We start off with a confrontation between Dragona Joestar and the police. It is a confrontation that easily escalates solely on behalf of the police officer's actions, a depiction that isn't far from many of the experiences one can find with American cops on the news or social media. This is definitely one way of setting up an American backdrop, unfortunately starting with an abuse of power that seems in part to be racially motivated if we consider the fact here that Mr. Police Officer seems to have taken a master class in projection. Whether or not this is just a one-time thing or is meant to establish a continuing theme of authorities abusing their power throughout the story waits to be seen. My guess would be the latter based on the fact that the lives they are living would naturally lead to confrontations with those in power, whether that just be the police or even perhaps certain 3-letter agencies. Through this exchange, we learn that Jodio is 15 years old and his brother Dragona is 18 and they are both partners in crime. Having blood-related siblings as main characters working together is definitely a first for the series, and interesting considering the fractured families of the past that we've grown used to. I'm excited to see what sort of things Araki might be able to pull off with such an interesting dynamic. Another thing sure to make things interesting is the current ambiguity of Dragona's gender and identity. They seem to be unbothered by the fact that they are referred to as Nisan by Jodio, even though they appear to be presenting themselves as female and use the feminine pronoun Atashi for themselves in Japanese. Unfortunately, neither of these is much help in regards to figuring out Dragona's identity. I'll link a post in the description that comes from one of the translators where they discuss this in more detail. I'm sure later on things will be made more clear, whether it comes directly from Dragona themselves or from some sort of character panel done by Araki. Personally, I think the current ambiguity of things was a deliberate choice on his part, and that it's most likely that the mystery around Dragona's identity will play a role further on in the story. Looking further into things, something else I find interesting about this interaction with the police is the mention of COVID. Lots of media with stories that are meant to take place within our world at the present time struggle with the idea of depicting it, with some just outright pretending it didn't exist. Previously for me, the Steel Ball Run universe seemed more distant from our reality than the original series. Though COVID is depicted in the original universe and thus spoke Rohan Kishibe, seeing liberties taken with the Kingdom of Naples surviving the unification of Italy in 1870 and the 23rd President of the United States running a cross-country race to find the corpse of Christ who apparently came to and died in America, I thought things might not quite follow the same path that we're on. But apparently I thought wrong. If the events here do in fact run parallel to the real world, then we can guess based on indoor settings that this story takes place after March of 2022, when Hawaii removed its indoor mask mandate. Back to the story. This two were seemingly pulled over so the cop could abuse his power and take advantage of Dragona. Our first act of pure evil. A reminder of the evil shadow of human beings. Though what happened here was unpleasant to read to say the least, I think it was done to represent this part's clash between good and evil which, as part of Araki's writing philosophy, necessitates evil to be depicted in a realistic way. If this event did not occur, then establishing these characters as good based on the context of everything else that happens within the story would be an impossibility. Because this happened, we can clearly see the separation between good and evil, and it's not just based solely on the actions of the police officers either. Jodio's quickness in coming to defend his brother against the officers is certainly a display of good character, and the fact that Dragona doesn't let him beat them to death shows some degree of morality on their part. Not to mention that Jodio doesn't seem too upset about the prospect of their recovery, moving the officers whom he previously referred to as trash off the road and onto the safety of the sidewalk. He could have just as easily left them there to suffer the same fate as Kira, and the PD probably would be none the wiser. Other things of note is that Jodio appears to have an explosive temper but seems to be able to snap back into rational thinking very quickly, which in this case allows the both of them to methodically cover up any evidence of their crimes, like they've seemingly done many times before. It's also in this segment that we get to see both the appearance and ability of their stands. Jodio's stand November Rain appears to be a close range stand that can produce rain droplets heavy enough to dig into someone's skin, also being able to completely crush them if the number is great enough. I definitely think there should be a new name for this type of stand design. It reminds me a lot of fun in doggy style, and it has almost an alien feeling to it. That little triangle design on his cone matches the one on Jodio's outfit. This may be the part of the stand that generates the precipitation, or at least the hole in which it comes out of. Dragona's stand Smooth Operators also appears to be a close range stand, composed of a colony of little robot guys on treads that can seemingly move anything, no matter how fixed it is upon an object. Such as when Dragona is able to switch the photos on the license they were using as well as the plate on the back of the truck, even being capable of displacing the eyes of the police officer down to his cheek. Whenever this ability is being used, Dragona appears to be touching what needs to be moved, which might be a requirement for the ability to work. Also, the little symbol on their head is SO for Smooth Operator, which is pretty cool. So after everything goes down, they get to their destination and drop off the package. They are told that they are late, but that they will be relied on again by this group in the future, and are thrown a bag of money for their services. The panel seemed to focus heavily on the fact that all these people are armed. You can see the rifle on one guy's back, a close-up of said rifle, and the man in charge paying them carrying a pistol in his hand as he walks up to them. Because of this attention to detail, I definitely think firearms will be a topic that will come into play later. If I was to wager a guess that it is indeed drugs that they are trafficking, it's probably cocaine based on the way it is packed and its appearance as a white powder. I think the drop-off location being in a junkyard is intentional as well. We know from earlier that the truck didn't belong to them, and scattered all around the yard are dismantled vehicles. I don't think these gangsters would have them drive around a company vehicle to do their misdeeds. It was most likely stolen by one of the two parties, with the plan being to strip down the vehicle afterwards to cover up any trail that might be left behind. There's no indication that these gangsters know about the duo's stand abilities and the fact that they'd use their abilities to cover up things on their end. The value of the cocaine kept within the surfboards could be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, so it'd be a small investment to keep things safe, especially if this activity is something put in motion by Meryl May, who we know never leaves any evidence behind. I also love the way the duo just shrugs off the question by the man about the police car. Things probably wouldn't have ended well if he knew it was them behind the burned down cop car. But the two seem to be so confident in their own abilities that they know it's a problem not even worth acknowledging. And I guess they also have Uber in the Steel Ball Run universe now? I wonder what Viz will localize that name into at this rate, probably 10 years in the future. Maybe we'll get lucky and Uber will be insolvent by then, so Viz won't be afraid to keep the name in there. I know that probably sounds weird. Maybe I'll explain why I think Uber going insolvent would be a good thing on Twitter. Home to all my weird hot takes. Like my JOJOLands predictions, which definitely didn't go my way. Moving on to Jodio's narration about his mother. Reading this, I know he seems to think very childishly. I know he's 15 and all, but his attention to detail regarding her morning routine, the little hearts in the text boxes, and this romanticized idea that everybody loves their mother because him and his brother protect her and ensure her social safety from behind the scenes, reads like something a child's innocent mind would come up with. Whatever the case may be, I definitely think based on this and things that come up later, that Jodio has a much different view on the world compared to most people. Like when he describes his brother as enjoying girl-like fashion and mentions that the swelling in his chest is done by cosmetic injections that he hasn't personally seen. I just find it strange that he doesn't call them breasts, and the need for him to mention that he's never seen the procedure done before seems irrelevant. Perhaps he is unable to see Dragona as anything but his big brother, so nothing comes to mind regarding any sort of intent behind the changes in Dragona's body, rather than it just being for cosmetics. I don't know if this theory will sound a bit out there, but maybe maybe Dragona used smooth operators to accomplish this, and in fact didn't undergo any sort of procedure. If the stand is able to freely move around and displace things, like when the police officer's eye came down to his cheek, would it really be out of the question for Dragona to be able to move fat around their body and accomplish the same effect as injections? That could be why Araki felt it was necessary to have Jodio explain that he never saw it happen personally. It may be a bit of a stretch, but hey, that's what discussion videos are for, right? And I'd sure look cool in the off chance that I got something right here. Then there's all their dragon tattoos and the name Dragona. Maybe there's some sort of Hawaiian legend about dragons and their character is based off of it, like the Mo'u. I'm sure I pronounced that wrong, but the smooth operator's ability can be used like I said before. It could make sense. A shape-shifting dragon. Coincidence? Or not? Maybe Dragona is meant to be a representation of the Hawaiian Mahu, meaning in the middle, which is considered to be a type of third gender. Their favorite motto, be sure not to push yourself too hard, but don't give up, is definitely a healthy mindset to have if one's goal is continual steady progress. Maybe this will be their mantra that they use in tough times to keep themselves going, or an indication of their own personal limits when it comes to pursuing a goal. Something that doesn't appear to be concerned in the case of Jodio, who wants to become rich no matter what it takes. These two somewhat opposed ideals could be a source of conflict between the two later on. The duo's parents came from the mainland, Atlantic City. I can imagine since it was a resort city, the cost of living would have been fairly high. Not to mention ready access to unscrupulous places such as casinos. Perhaps something happened there on their father's side that caused the couple to move to Honolulu. Something that persisted despite the changing scenery which caused them to split. Back to the story, we see Jodio on the bus, and pretty much everything we see here needs no explanation due to context provided later on in the chapter. This is where we first get to meet his unnamed senpai and get to see another short episode of sudden rage on the part of Jodio. For now, I'll be calling him senpai until his name is revealed later on in the series. Senpai purchases the stuff from him which appears to be the same cocaine-like substance from earlier. It is unknown whether or not senpai is a user of it, as Meryl May later states that he's not an addict when she has him join Jodio's team. This indicates to me that they all know the substance is addictive. Perhaps Meryl May has the knowledge as to whether or not he's using it responsibly, or more likely, not using it at all. There's always the case that he could be reselling it or buying it for someone else. This is the part of the story where we get into Jodio's idea of mechanisms, the type of which are mechanisms of trust that in his mind have the power to bring about safety, wealth, and social status even if operating outside of the law. People without this mechanism are bound to become pushovers even if they have strength, smarts, and money. Though this may seem like another childish idea in a sort of I'm 14 and this is deep type of fashion. In reality, strange mindsets like these are commonly shared amongst many wealthy people.
Who do you love the most in the world?
My family.
Once a day, genuinely sit there for 5 minutes and make pretend one of them got shot in the face.
It may be the case that it matters not whether this mindset is grounded in reality, and that the belief behind it is what is actually the driving factor behind Jodio's success. Like in the case of Poco Loco, where he was willing to put himself in perilous situations and succeed due to the belief in his own luck, which he even manifested as a stand that solely existed to encourage that train of thought. On the other side of the coin, it could be just as it appears, an accurate observation of one of the world's many unseen forces that seem to manifest as opportunities, appearing as forms and shapes that are designed to be taken advantage of. That is why there could be something considered as the pinnacle of mechanisms, which is yet to have been seen, as life's greatest opportunity has yet to present itself to Jodio. I want to say getting off the bat that I don't think mechanisms are meant to be some sort of new supernatural phenomenon like stands. Though the foreword by Araki mentions that stands have forms and shapes but are invisible, which sounds a lot like what Jodio said about mechanisms, I think it's most likely a metaphor for one of the many unseen principles the world operates on, like fate, gravity, flow, and calamity. The mechanisms Jodio speaks of here are mechanisms of trust. I'd like to think that the idea of mechanisms won't just be limited to that of trust as the story goes on, and perhaps other concepts such as knowledge, exchange, etc. will be introduced as Jodio's mindset broadens from what he's come to know from being a gopher. The idea that they can show up as forms and shapes, as well as having the capability of being taken or destroyed despite their universality, leads me to believe mechanisms are metaphorical in nature, especially since they have the general principle of bringing one wealth. In that case, almost anything could be considered a mechanism, so long as that's the end result. Moving on to Paco Lovlantes. I find it interesting that his stand is based off the use of prehensile muscles that are capable of grabbing things and how he uses it to fuel his kleptomania. The fact that he went from chubby to chiseled 2 years ago might have to do with the muscular control he gained after awakening his stand. Despite being 19, he's still attending high school. Based on what Jodio said, it seems that he was absent for a year, which must have held him back. It also sounds like he wasn't seen during that time even outside of school, so perhaps he was outside the country working on behalf of Meryl May. There's a chance that he could be a rock human too, which would explain his absence. Though they typically only sleep from 30 to 90 days, it is said they can hibernate for up to 25 years. It would be easier socially just to take off the whole year instead of returning to school after missing a few months. This behavior would be deemed odd and reflect negatively on him. In fact, if we look at his hat, the lettering of his name is stylized much like that of Poochie's white snake, which represented the 4 nucleobases of carbon-based DNA, A, C, G, T. A for adenine, C for cytosine, G for guanine, and T for thymine. Pucci's white snake was composed of acid, much like DNA, and if you look at his melt your heart ability, which creates illusions via a digestive or melting acid, you can draw some similarities between that and Paco's ice cream pin that contains his name as well. This melting similarity leads me to believe that Paco does in fact stand for some sort of silicon-based acid or DNA. Perhaps Paco is the 4 nucleobases of silicon-based life forms. What they be specifically is unknown since silicon-based life forms do not exist in the real world. Thus, how their DNA would be composed would be something that is completely left up to Araki. In any case, the life of Paco seems to be an interesting one. Apparently his dad bit off part of his ear in a case of domestic violence. Could imagine if he had his stand ability at this time, it'd be hard to do much to him due to his muscular control. Biting off part of his ear might have been the only thing his father could do against him. This might be why when Dragona catches him stealing, they grab him by the ear whilst using their stand as a sort of way of preventing him from using the muscles in his ear to either hold onto their finger or pull his ear away from their grip, showing him that he shouldn't just be getting away with everything just because he can. It's interesting that he would rather fight things legally in the ring with Dragona rather than settling things there. If I could imagine, this behavior was probably instilled to him by Meryl May, as there's no way she'd work with him if he drew attention to himself as a criminal. Jodio, Dragona, and Paco were called to Meryl's fashion shop Eco for an assignment. This is the same fashion shop that Dragona officially holds a job at. It appears to be a front for criminal activity, and is a way for her to launder money. The fact that she chooses to run this place 100% legitimately, even showing a strong aptitude for fashion design that could spell success in its own right, just shows how methodical and shrewd of a character she is. No one in their right mind would question what is going on there. Since all the merchandise in the shop is designed by her, there definitely wouldn't be any telltale signs of a money laundering operation present there. Working as a principal, a shop owner, wife, mother, and talented criminal would certainly require a lot of hard work and dedication. Perhaps she is aided by some sort of stand ability, or she is aided by the same drugs she helps to traffic. If it turns out to be something like a stimulant like cocaine, it would certainly give the energy and alertness needed to balance out so many tasks. Though ideally, getting high in your own supply is something that any smart criminal would know to avoid. She tasks him with stealing a blue 24-karat diamond worth $6 million at least from a Japanese tourist. Apparently she has connections with someone working in customs at the airport and was able to get all their information via that route. We know from earlier that Jodio and Dragona's mother works at the airport, so the person providing that information could be her. And perhaps the respect the community gives her is from her dealings with Meryl May, rather than the actions of the two brothers. Funnily enough, she says that this person came from a flight that took off from Narita Airport. This is the same airport that Joseph from Part 3 uses to arrive to Japan, and this airport is located in Tokyo. There are many other international airports scattered across Japan that this unknown character could have come from, so there may be something behind Araki's choosing this same one from before. Though this world's Joseph is nearing 100 years of age, so I doubt it's him. But it'd make for a very interesting story if he was indeed to come back. What else we know about this person is that they are also considered rich, will be staying in a large villa, and that they are a Japanese tourist on a sightseeing vacation. This doesn't really tell us whether or not this person is ethnically Japanese. It could very well be the case that this person is not ethnically Japanese, but holds a Japanese citizenship. So that isn't very helpful when it comes to narrowing down who this character might be. We see that Meryl notes that this is a difficulty level 2 scenario. What the scale looks like is currently unknown. She appears to come to this conclusion based on the fact that this person is unlikely to have a gun in the house since they are Japanese, and that they are traveling alone for an extended period of time. She also has the ability to get the house's floor plan if needed, showing how deep her connections are. But the fact that she decides they'll need the team of 4 to do what appears to be a simple task implies there is a degree of danger present within the operation. Jodio seems to respect the rules of his ranking as gopher and lets his superiors decide what the group will be doing, as well as understanding that his position will most likely make his role the lookout. The 2% cut they'd receive would still be a significant amount of money, 40k if it was just the 3 of them, or 30k now that the group is composed of 4 members. Jodio's senpai from earlier who was sold the goods becomes a 4th member of the group. Like I mentioned earlier, Meryl seems to know whatever this guy is doing with the drugs and is confident that he's not an addict. In any case, we don't know much about this senpai character. We don't even know if he's a stand user. All we can gather is that his presence may be part of some sort of mechanism. Perhaps there's another rule of nature that when you form a team, there always has to be an oddball. In any case, this is where the chapter ends, with Jodio exclaiming that Meryl was definitely right about needing 4 people, and that in fact, no matter how many people they could have brought with them, no amount would have been sufficient enough to get things done. What's left to do is to speculate on who this person may be and then finish the video with some final thoughts and predictions of what we might see going forward. In Jojolion, there is a mention of a cancelled family trip to Hawaii with the Higashikatas, so it wouldn't be out of the question for one of them to choose Hawaii due to their familiarity with it. Whoever it may be, they'd have to have a stand ability that would be strong enough to counter 4 or more stand users. So I'd personally take Norisuke, Hato, and Daya off the list of potential candidates, as their abilities aren't exactly flexible enough to counter the appearance of multiple unexpected stand users at once. That leaves Joshu, Mitsuba, Tsurugi, and Josuke. Joshu's Nut King Call could certainly be used in a number of diverse ways and counter the abilities of the group by manipulating his body and the objects around him. as well as the fact that he could dismantle parts of the opposing team's bodies. I could see him being naive enough to bring such a diamond overseas for some sort of love interest after getting over his obsession with Yasuho. Mitsuba's Awaking 3 Leaves ability of vector manipulation would be able to simply redirect any people or projectiles within her vicinity, as well as being able to fight offensively, such as creating projectile weapons out of material in the environment through the power of redirection. Tsurugi, who'd be an adult during the setting of JOJOLands, could use Paper Moon King to create a hostile environment to any would-be thieves. The origami he creates have different properties depending on what they are designed after, such as the banana origami that was created with his paper that caused Yotsu to trip and fall like the real thing. On top of that, the illusions he is capable of creating can manipulate people's sensory abilities, thus affecting their ability to perceive reality. He is able to make Aisho think that every bus in Morio was Jobin, leading him to be run over and killed because he was unaware that they were in fact buses. Last but not least, we have the most likely one in my opinion, Josuke Higashikata. He personally may be interested in investigating the Rokakaka, which may still exist in some islands in the south, which may be why he chose to come to Hawaii. His regular bubbles are extremely versatile, both capable of offense and defense. His ability to temporarily plunder certain properties of things that his pop bubbles come into contact with is also a force to be reckoned with, taking anything from an object's friction down to things like the vibrations of his own voice. He can absorb substances with his bubbles as well, which easily counters November Rain, and there isn't much else that Dragona's smooth operators or Paco's The Hustle could do against him. I doubt that he'd use Go Beyond because it would probably be unnecessary against most opponents, and requires assistance to be aimed, which he would not have being alone. If it is Josuke, I could see him eventually joining the group as a sort of navigator, like what happened with Joseph in Stardust Crusaders. I mean, the man is half sailor, and most importantly, dresses like one. There's also the Narita airport connecting the two characters, perhaps representing the transition from main character to navigator. If we look at the boat pictured in the preview, even though it appears to only have Dragona and Jodio piloting, there looks to be an internal cabin that might house Josuke or any other allies they may have on their journey. To close things out, I think that like Steel Ball Run and Jojolion before it, the JoJoLands story will share similarities with parts of the original manga. If we consider Jodio's name and illicit behavior, we can guess that the most major influence will come from Golden Wind. If you think about it, Giorno's own name could be considered a combination of both JoJo and Dio, just like Jodio. Some might say that Giorno's whole thing was being against selling drugs to kids, which doesn't seem to be a rule Jodio cares much about.
I know that I'm gonna smash your face in if you don't shut your goddamn mouth.
One last thing before the outro is that I genuinely believe predicting what Araki will write in the future chapters is almost a fruitless endeavor. Despite the fact that he has a definite direction planned for the story, he does choose to write his stories like a diary. If I had to predict what the final enemy would be for JoJoLands at this point, I'd have to say it could either be the IRS coming after them for tax evasion, or some sort of special CIA task force composed of stand users looking to move the drug trade into their own hands. The CIA has been involved in cocaine trafficking before, and Araki is a madman, so don't ever say no to the possibility. That's the end of my thoughts regarding Chapter 1 of the JoJoLands. Since the airing of the anime adaptation, the English JoJo fanbase has grown many sizes, meaning there will be a lot more people following along with the releases of this new part as it comes out. This will most certainly be a net positive for the community, and is sure to keep the topic of JoJo a matter of interest and discussion in the minds of many. Personally, I'm looking forward to whatever the future has in store with us, whether it be the manga, anime adaptations, OVAs, movies, one-shots, spin-offs, or anything else Araki has in store for us. Be sure to subscribe to the channel to see more videos like this one anytime a new chapter is released. The majority of my content in the future will definitely be in relation to JoJo. If you're new around here, please come check out some of my previous videos to get an idea of what to expect. Be sure to leave a comment about your thoughts regarding the JoJoLands. If you thought I was particularly insightful, don't forget to give the video a thumbs up. Follow me on Twitter if you're interested in more updates, opinions, and hot takes. This was definitely a long one. Anyway, till next time, farewell.